It's too much crime. Everything is going downhill. The economy is going bad. The food is expensive. It's like affordable housing is not for everybody. It's just horrible.
Biden, they have disrespected the people of the city of New York. This was the best city in the world. We're not the great apple anymore. We're not the big apple. We are the rotten apple.
Biden went on the Charlemagne the God show and said, "You ain't black if you don't vote for him." I'm black because that's how I was born and what I am. And Trump is the man that can save this country. Period.
I want food to go cheaper. The gas, I want gas cheaper. When I came and he was the president, the gas was a lot cheaper than it is right now.
Now we're becoming the Bronx second-class citizens. We have this influx of migrants are coming in, and they're getting everything. And everyone in the Bronx, in the city of New York, is forgotten.
The next day.
What else really stood out to you about the rally?
I will say this rally did look a lot like America. There was a lot of Asian voters there. There were a lot of Hispanic voters, a lot of black voters there, which is not typical for a Trump rally that I go to when I'm in Wisconsin or Michigan. Yeah. So that's what was fascinating.
But it is a cross-section of New York.
Exactly, exactly. And that's specifically why Trump was there yesterday. Those are key demographics that he sees are starting to break for him just a little bit. That door is opening for Hispanic voters to start voting for Trump in record numbers. They want to capitalize on that in this election. They think if they do, it'll spell success for them.
All right, guys. So after Trump's massively successful and historic rally in deep blue Bronx, we have to talk about the reactions from the mainstream liberal media, because you guys know that the mainstream liberal media, they are fuming over the fact that so-called black and brown people showed up to this massive rally, again, in deep blue Bronx, New York, where a Republican has not won in 100 years. However, Trump shows up. He's probably the only Republican that can actually pull something off like this. And he has a massive turnout. The Trump campaign estimated that over 20,000 people showed up. A lot of them are black and brown in a so-called black and brown district, okay? And this would suggest that the tides are turning in politics. We're seeing a shift in the demographics of the GOP as there are more, again, so-called black and brown people coming along and getting on the Trump train, because the economy is a colorblind issue, a point that I've been driving home here lately, because the mainstream liberal media, they can't see anything except through the lenses of race. And if they continue to see things through the lens of race, they're never going to truly understand why so-called black and brown voters are gravitating towards Trump. Because, again, the economy is a colorblind issue. Okay, and this is how you get deranged takes from MSNBC, people like Joy Reid and Charles Blow, where they're claiming that, well, Trump only showed up to the Bronx to do this rally, not because he's trying to appeal to black and brown people. He's not actually trying to get their vote. He's actually trying to prove that he's not racist to white people in swing states. One of the most ridiculous takes that I think I've ever heard in my life. Take a look.
Let me stay with you for just one moment, Charles Blow. What would be the point of Donald Trump going to the Bronx and bigging up Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un in a place he can never win? The Bronx is full of black and Latino folk, and he's not fond of those.
Right. Well, but you said it yourself in your question. He's not going to win New York. He's not going to win the Bronx. But that audience is not the Bronx. Yeah. The audience is everyone else in states that he could possibly win. And what he tries to do, and there's no downside for him to do this, by the way, what he's trying to do is to signal to other people, in swing states who are white, who don't want to be thought of as voting for racists, to soften the ground there and say, well, maybe he's not such a racist. Also, to maybe shave off a couple of percentage points among blacks and Hispanics. Also, people who look at it and say, I don't want to vote for a racist. And they say, well, maybe he's not as racist as they say that he is. This is signaling to other people, has nothing to do with New York, has nothing to do with the Bronx.
Yeah, the Unified Reich thing, he just says things like that. It's Trump. That's what they want us to be. Unified Reich is like a thing. It's like an actual, Google it.
Unified Reich is a thing. Google it, right? According to Joy Reid. Again, if you actually do Google it, you'll figure out that the whole Unified Reich propaganda from the mainstream liberal media was a hoax, okay? But that doesn't stop Joy Reid from going on her show and just flat out lying and saying that Trump was talking about a unified Reich, even though that ad was not made by the Trump campaign. That was something that he never said. But again, it's not like that network really cares about facts, right? They care more about narrative. This is how they come up with these types of crazy narratives, which, consist of conspiracies that, well, Trump showed up to the Bronx not to try to win over people's votes, which is his job as somebody campaigning for president of the United States. No, he showed up to try to prove that he's not racist to white people in swing states. Again, this is one of the most delusional takes that I've ever seen in my life. And you only get a take like this when you're high on copium, right? I mean, this is not something that a reasonable or rational or logical human being would ever think of as some explanation for why Trump would hold a rally in the Bronx, right? I mean, it's not like Trump went out there and started doing all the race hustling and pandering, what Joe Biden did, right? Basically trying to say that, well, if you're black, you have to work 10 times harder than everybody else, and your country doesn't love you. That's not what Trump was saying, okay? What Trump was saying is that, well, Biden's economy is terrible for everybody, right? His whole message was that Biden's policies are bad for you, right? Especially when you talk about policies like illegal immigration, okay? But again, these people can't fathom or even process the idea that, hey, maybe so-called black and brown people are not a monolith, and maybe so-called black and brown people aren't falling for the old trick from the mainstream liberal media where they boohoo, whine, and cry racism. Well, Trump a racist. He a bigot. He hate black people. He hate gays, right? Maybe that just doesn't work anymore because so-called racism and bigotry don't have much to do with people's real life living conditions like the economy, right? And that's the reason why people are gravitating towards Trump is because they know that economically speaking, they were much better off under Trump than Biden. But again, if you listen to the propagandists at MSNBC, they'll tell you the exact opposite, right? They'll tell you that down is up and up is down, right? This is what they'll do, especially when it comes to the economy. On any issue, really, they'll tell you, don't believe your reality, okay? Your eyes are lying to you, okay? You don't hear what you actually hear. All the things that you're living are not true, right? Everything was much worse under Trump. But even some of their propagandists who still have an ounce of journalistic integrity that actually did some real journalism, like, for example, being on the ground and talking to the voters, are acknowledging the reality that, hey, these voters are upset with Biden's economy and that they are really Trump supporters. These are not fakes, right? You should believe your eyes and your ears and your reality that, hey, the movement towards Trump is real.
Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns, who was there at this event. Chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign, Matthew Dowd, and former Obama campaign advisor, Amisha Cross. So Dasha, you were there last night. You heard it. You talked to the people who were in that crowd. How was his message received?
Well, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I did talk to folks in that crowd who themselves were immigrants. A lot of folks from the Dominican Republic. A lot of people that I talked to were born and raised in the Bronx. For some of them, this was their first ever Trump event. And when you talk to immigrants that are going to these Trump rallies, they agree with his message on immigration. Their point is, look, I did it the right way. I came here legally, and especially those living in New York right now, the sentiment I heard from a lot of voters was, we have these immigrants right now that the city is taking care of in a way that I've never felt taken care of by this city. It was a large crowd and a diverse crowd. Yes, there were some people from Westchester, from New Jersey, but there were a lot of people there that were from the Bronx, black and Latino voters that are sick of how much they're paying for gas and groceries, that are frustrated with the situation at the border, and that find President Biden's rhetoric when it comes to minority voters a little bit offensive. Take a listen.
Biden went on the Charlemagne the God show and said, you ain't black if you don't vote for him. I'm black because that's how I was born and what I am. And Trump is the man that can save this country. Period.
So interesting to talk to those voters, Anna, and multiple people actually mentioned that Charlemagne the God interview. I did press back with some of those folks, mentioning some of Trump's rhetoric that's been seen as racist and bigoted. They said they don't have a problem with that. They view his actions over his words in terms of what they feel he can do for their community. Again, the economy, those pocketbook issues, over and over again, top of the list.
Unfortunately, as I said, in times of troubled economy, there's an audience in America that can be appealed to by a strong man and blaming the other. And the other thing I'll note is that he never, on his sort of English, why these people all speak all different language, I notice he never speaks about the problem of somebody speaking Norwegian or somebody speaking Swedish or somebody speaking Danish. It's either Latin America, Mexico, or Africa, which is a pretty strong signal of what he means.
Doctor, are these voters just not offended at all by those types of comments and some of the actions he took as president?
Yeah, no, I will say I talked to these voters about the Central Park Five. I talked to them about some of the comments that he's made and the policies beyond rhetoric, right? They are just so focused on what their lives are like right now, what they can feel tangibly, that when I push back with those comments, they shut that down. They said, listen, he might say some things. Again, they focused on the rhetoric still because they feel like that's what the media sort of, consistently puts out there. They say he might say some stuff that's offensive, but at the end of the day, I feel like my life was better under former President Trump than under President Biden. And I take all of the points that we're hearing here, but this is what I hear from voters consistently. And we see this reflected in the data as we're seeing these numbers of Black and Hispanic voters sort of getting chipped away from the Democratic Party and moving towards Trump. A lot can happen in the next 6 months, but I just see this consistently as I talk.
Wow. So again, the race card is not working. Okay, you guys heard it there from MSNBC. MSNBC, they're admitting the race card is being rejected. That voters are saying, well, in response to the media pressing them on Trump's racist comments. It's amazing. People are waking up. It really sucks that it takes a terrible economy in order for people to realize that, hey, all that racism and bigotry stuff that the mainstream liberal media be complaining about, that's not a real problem, right? At least not compared to the economy, not compared to the price of food, not compared to the price of housing, not compared to the cost of living, not compared to the border being wide open and Democrats giving illegals all our resources. That racism and bigotry stuff not going to work on me, right? This is what they're saying. This is what they told MSNBC. And guess what? During that whole interview, right, the Democrat strategists, the Never Trumpers, right, the only thing they could say is, well, Trump racist. Trump racist, Project 2025.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party created the chaos he is hoping to benefit off of. When the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, and when the Florida governor, DeSantis, decided that they were going to send migrants to cities like my hometown of Chicago, to New York, and various other places across the country, they did it with 2024 in mind because they wanted to create this fight for resource allocation. They fundamentally understood that many Black people, as well as brown people in these communities, already were suffering from lack of housing supports, from food insecurity, from other issues. And they sought to create a more desperate situation and to have a population that would demonize new arrivals. I think that it is extremely disheartening. I would say that when talking to these voters in New York, there should have been more questions regarding or more comments about Trump's policies, because this isn't a rhetoric issue. Trump wanted to have the Central Park Five actually murdered. He wanted to ensure that the state killed those young men. He wanted to ensure that, Black people did not have a space in the buildings that he had across the state of New York. In many cases, he's also pushed for anti-civil rights legislation. We have already seen what Project 2025 looks like. And for Black people and brown people across this country, it is an assault on our rights and an assault on our very being. That's what we should be talking about here. This is not a rhetorical game. This is a man who has plans in place and a man who appointed judges who will make this happen.
Yeah. So I just want to correct this Democrat propagandist here. Trump did not create the illegal immigration crisis that is happening in the liberal cities. Biden created that. And I'm so happy that these people are smart enough to understand that. Listen, yes, you're being bused illegals from Texas, but Biden is sending a lot of those illegals himself to these liberal cities. Also, on top of that, Biden is the one that's responsible for the open border policies. They realize that. They're smart enough to know that. I know that Democrats think that voters are stupid, especially the so-called Black and brown voters. But they understand that that's not Trump's fault. That's not Greg Abbott's fault. That's not Ron DeSantis' fault, because Democrats want red states to take on all the illegals and to deal with the issue without any help from the government in regards to closing the border or any type of federal funding to help them take care of it. And these people are smart enough to understand that that's not fair. So it is Biden's fault what is happening to these liberal cities. It is the Democrats' fault, the sanctuary city policies. They welcome illegals, and they got exactly what their politicians, their elected leaders said that they wanted, right? But I'm telling you, if the response from Democrats to the economic issues in this country is that, well, Trump is a racist, it's just not going to work. You might as well just quit, right? You might as well just concede the election today because it's not going to work. And that's all they got, guys. That's all they have. All they have in response to the economic problems of the Biden administration that is plaguing this country is, well, Trump's a bigot, guys. Right? Don't you understand? That's more important than anything, okay? Forget how you were living and how great things were under Trump. Forget about all that. Trump is a racist, right? And that is a bigger threat. That has a bigger impact on your life than the economy. It's just not going to work. So anyways, CNN and their reaction, they are a little bit more in touch with reality in regards to how this rally is good news for Trump and bad news for Democrats.
There are a few things. Number one, guys, if we could just put this newspaper up on the screen. Look, this is Donald Trump's hometown paper, the New York Post. He got the headline that he wanted out of this, and this is something that Trump is so important to him. But it's more than that, Kate. Yeah. Look at the Crotona Park area, right? The Crotona Park precinct where that rally was held yesterday. It's a majority Hispanic precinct. And I want you to take a look, essentially, at the election results over the last few cycles. And what you would see there is essentially see that, look, this is a very Democratic precinct, right? But look at the margin trend line here. You see Obama 94, Obama 96, Clinton 92. Biden won it, but by only 69 points. There's
only 69 points?
Why is that important? Because look at that. That's 23 percentage points less than Hillary Clinton won it by. This is a sign of the Hispanic movement that we saw last cycle, right? Where we saw, although Hispanics still favored the Democratic candidate in Joe Biden, they were less likely to favor him than they did Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama both times. And it's not just there that happened. We saw it in Hispanic precincts and counties across the country from Southeast Florida, Southern Texas, even in the Los Angeles area.
So past, talk about present. What are the trends you're seeing among Hispanic voters this year?
Yeah, so we saw a trend among Hispanic voters from 2016 to 2020 where they became less Democratic. Look at the trend that we're seeing right now in the polling, right? So if you look back at Hispanic voters at this point in the 2020 cycle, Joe Biden had a 25-point lead. Look at where that lead is today. It's just 7 points. Donald Trump right now at 44%, if that held, would be the best performance for a Republican candidate among Hispanic voters since George W. Bush back in 2004. And this is part of a larger trend line, Kate, that we're seeing among non-white voters. We see it among black voters as well. We've discussed that on this program before, whereby they're much more favorable to Donald Trump than they were 4 years ago. And of course, Donald Trump did better amongst both of those groups in 2020 versus how he did in 2016.
Yeah, but it's not enough, right? It's not enough when it comes to black voters, right? Now, for Hispanic voters, it's huge because their population is steadily growing, right? Us black folks, right, who overwhelmingly support Democrats on abortion, unfortunately, our 12 to 13% not growing too much, okay? But again, the black liberals will tell you how much they're pro-black, except when it comes to, the black population, right? They're totally fine with black people losing the very tiny amount of political relevance that we have, right? Again, it's amazing how that works. But anyways, again, it really blows my mind that Hispanics, essentially, they're almost even, right, at this point. Okay, we really don't know because nobody's actually really voted yet, but we've seen from, the prior elections that they're definitely moving in that direction of being more conservative, while black people are still, slow walking it, okay? Black women are still voting for Biden at a, 95% clip? It's black men that are making the major shift, but again, it's not enough. It's crazy to me how every other demographic in this country realizes that, hey, it's probably not a good thing to overwhelmingly at an 80-90% clip support one political party and think that you're going to be relevant. Black people don't seem to understand that concept, right? So again, not enough black people, but I'm glad to see Hispanics definitely moving over.
Wrap it all up as we see it right now. What does that mean for President Biden's pathway to 270?
What does that mean?
The electoral votes.
Exactly right. So essentially what that means is if you look nationally, Hispanics make up about 10% of likely voters, all right? So Where do they make up a lower percentage of that? They make them up in the Great Lake battleground states. Look at that.
Lower percentage.
Lower percentage. 3% in Michigan, 2% in Pennsylvania, 4% in Wisconsin. We have been harping over and over and over again that Joe Biden's best path to re-election is to run through the Great Lakes. And polling and results that we saw like in Crotona Park in 2020 and the polling that we see in 2024 just reinforce that. He is going to probably do best where white voters make up the vast majority of voters. He still has a path to 270 at this point, even though he's doing more poorly amongst Hispanics and black voters than he did 4 years ago, because his numbers seem to be holding with white voters who make up the vast majority of voters in those Great Lake battlegrounds.
Which is insane to think about, in my opinion. That, the more diverse the swing state, the better Trump is doing. But that's why I believe that Trump, when it comes to his VP pick, he definitely has to be thinking in the direction of, okay, how am I going to win over those Rust Belt state voters, right? And that is how I would be thinking about the situation, because it seems as if Trump in and of itself, he's enough, right? He's enough to get the so-called minorities to vote enough for Republicans or to vote enough for him. I'm not sure if they're going to vote Republican down the ticket, but they definitely like him, right? He's enough, okay? So I don't think he needs to double down on that. I think what he really needs to do is to shore up his weaknesses when it comes to those Rust Belt states and figure out a way to win those voters over when, we're talking about who he should select as VP. But again, it is amazing to me that you see MSNBC acknowledging. I mean, that reporter was shocked to see that, hey, my claims of racism, my boohoo and crying racism did not work on so-called black and brown voters, and that they just completely rejected it off the cuff because of the fact that the economy is so bad. And I'm so happy to see that we're finally moving past the whole boohoo and crying racism thing being an effective form of politics, right? Because racism is not the biggest problem in this country. It's not even close to the biggest problem in this country. And I think what people realize is that the boohoo and crying racism has led to disastrous policies. All of the disastrous policies of the Biden administration and these progressives running these liberal cities have been a result of them boohoo and crying racism. So therefore, we must enact the most Looney Tune policies ever that hurt everyday normal people. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.